Hi again. Here we are to talk a little more about WordPress and continue with the Nob Hill Gazette. So here we are, and I've got my home page showing. You can see it says homepage PHP, so I know that this is the home page. And I've got the homepage content, which isn't much. It's just this one line here, right? And now what I'd like to do is I'd like to set up the grid system. So I have my grid set up. So I'm going to use the unsemantic grid, and they give you a little sample code here, as this example usage. And so we're going to just follow this. So they have grid classes that are in numbers of increments of 5. Okay, so you can do a grid 25, grid 50, grid 25, and these are percentages. So this is 25%, this would be 50%, and this would be another 25%. They also have a class for 33 and 66% if you want to do something in thirds or 2/3, okay? The grid classes have to be used inside of an element that has grid container, okay? So essentially, this would create a 1/4 wide column, and this would be a 50% wide column, and this would be a 25% wide column, and that would fill 100%, which would be the entire width of the container. Okay, and you can see it on their demo page. So if I look at the demo page here, you can see that this is 100% wide. Let me zoom out a little bit, right? You can see that's 100% wide, and it might be hard for you to read, but that says 1180. So the full width of the column maxes out at 1180. Okay, if you get the page and you make it smaller, then it's responsive, so the columns will shrink as they get smaller, but it maxes out at 1180. And you can see down here this is a 5%, 10%, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, right? And down here you can see this is 33, 33, 33. And this would be a 66% and a 33%, right? Okay, so how are we going to use this? Well, here's what I'm going to do, right? Looking at my design here, I'm going to have an area at the top that's going to be 100% wide, and then I'll have another area that's 100% and 100%, and then I'll have a thirds, right? This will be 33, 33, and 33, okay? So my page is divided into a header, which is these areas here at the very top, and then there's a footer, which will be this area at the bottom here, and then there's the content for the page, which will be everything in the middle, okay? Right? So how does that play out in our site? Well, let's look at the header first. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into brackets here, edit the header. And right now my header doesn't have much in it. It's just got a div here with the title and the blog description and the menu, right? And what I want to do is I'm going to add a div at the top here. Let me get the closing tag and move it to the bottom here, right? I'm going to tab this once so it looks good, right? And so this is going to be my header area. This ID that is the content here, this is the main content. So this tag opens here, but it doesn't close until the footer. So all of the content of the page will be inside this. So even though this doesn't close here, don't worry about it because it closes in the footer, in footer PHP, okay? So this div here, I want to give it a class and make it grid container. Okay, so this is going to be grid container. And then for the header here, I want to make this 100% wide. So I'll add a class name here and call it grid 100. So these grid classes must be used inside a grid container. Okay? So and you can have as many grid containers as you want on a page. Really, you only need one for an entire page, but it's kind of nice sometimes to have two because then you could wrap something around the grid container and have it go the full width. The grid container is going to be 1180, or actually it's going to be 1200 with the 10 pixels of padding on either side. So this grid container is going to, you know, have a maximum width. It won't reach all the way to the edges. So if we put this here and we wrap something around it, we can make a colored bar that goes all the way to the outside edges, right? But we'll get into that later. But anyway, this is what we have right here. So I've got the grid container, and then this is going to be grid 100, right? And the way that I've drawn this here, I've got my logo here, and then I have this, my navigation bar is going to go underneath that, right? And really this WP nav menu is my navigation bar. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to move this out of here, and maybe I'll put it here, right? And I'll make it, I'll put a div around it. Let me actually rearrange it like this here. So I'm going to add a div, right? And then this one will be class grid 100, right? So this takes up 100% of the width of our main column, our container. And this takes up 100%, so they'll, you know, this will be a box that goes all the way across, and this will be another box that goes all the way across, right? Okay, so there we go. So that works out pretty good. We'll save that, and then we'll give it a quick test here, right? So I'll refresh my site here. This is what it looked like before, and now it looks like this, which doesn't look too much different, but you'll notice actually that this edge now comes in, and if I inspect it, if I actually, let me just right click and inspect here, you'll see that the grid container here goes all the way to the edges. You can see the color right there. The orange is margin, and then the green is padding, and then the blue area is the width of the box, which is 1180. And when I look at these 100%, you know, class grid 100 right here, you can see it fills the entire space, right? Now, my menu here is going to go across horizontal, but we'll have to use a style, some styles in our style sheet to make the links run across horizontally, right? So they're you know, they're still vertical, but that's okay for now, okay? So we've got everything set up with our grid, right? So now maybe we should put the logo in, right? So we'll start at the top and kind of work our way down through the header. So let's do the logo now, okay? So I have a file here called logo.png, right? And I'm going to add that to my folder here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that into my images folder, right? So let me drag this in here, copy that to the images folder, and now I'll look in there, and there's logo, right? And when we use a logo, my logo looks like this, right? What I want to do is I want to replace this H1 that we're seeing over here on the page. This is an H1. What I want to do is I want to replace this text with this picture. Now, instead of using an image tag, it's kind of better for us to use a background image for this, because really this is just some design. It's not really a picture of something. So it's better as a background image, I think. So I'm going to use a background image for this. And now that I've got it in my images folder, we need to link to it. So now understand that if we write a style that uses a background image, all the paths to background images or other files that end up in your style sheet, those paths need to be relative to the style sheet. So that means when I write a path in style CSS, that path will point to, it will start its path from this file, and if I want to point to the images folder, then I'll start with images / and then the name of the file in here, okay? And if we put it somewhere else, then we'd have to work out the path, but essentially the path will start from the location of this file, okay? So let's go edit style CSS. And let's see, so what will we do here? Maybe I'll put in a comment here to remind me what I'm doing here. I'll do header, right? And then we'll say, let's go inspect our page. So if I look at header PHP, you can see that I have an ID here called header. And what I'd like to do is I actually want to style the H1, but I really want to style the anchor tag inside. So what I want to do is I really want to put the image inside this anchor tag. And the reason why is that means since the anchor tag is a clickable item, if I assign the image to the anchor tag, then the whole image will be clickable, right? So I have a couple of things to overcome. First of all, the anchor tag is not a block element, so we can't give it a height and width, right? So we'll have to declare it display block and then put the image in it, okay? My image here is, how big is that guy? He's 302 by 44, okay? So what do I have here? I have ID header, and then there's an H1 and an anchor tag, okay? And so we could put a class or an ID on this anchor tag, but maybe I'll just do a descendant or a child selector, right? So let's go back to our style sheet, and what I'll do is I'll say header, that's my ID, H1A, okay? And then we'll say display block background image is URL, and then remember we're starting from the style sheet, so I can go from there to the images folder / and the image is called logo.png, okay? So we'll set that up, and then if I look at the page and refresh it, you can see I've got the Nob Hill Gazette running all the way across, right? Well, that's okay. Not ideal, but it's okay. And then I also have the text of the link, in front of it. But you can see that I'm seeing the hand cursor, so I can click on the picture, and that's exactly what I want, right? So so let's fix it, right? So we'll say, how about no repeat, and then we'll give it a width of 302 pixels and a height of 44 pixels, okay? So now we'll save that. Let me make sure I saved that, right? And then we'll refresh it here. And then we've got one Nob Hill Gazette, and I can see the whole picture. It's not getting cropped, but I still have this text here. So there's a couple things you can do about the text. There's a whole bunch of different techniques for this. I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to set the color to transparent, okay? I don't know if that's the best, most, most HTML5 solution there, but if I make the text transparent, you can't see it, okay? I think you can still select it, but maybe that's okay because it'll say Nob Hill Gazette, right? Anyway, so there we go. We got our logo. So I'm going to stop here on this video, and then in the next video, we'll talk about finishing up the header and getting our menu to show up, and then we'll move on to the rest of the page.